Today, I'm going to present about advanced materials and 3D printing for desalination and water treatment. So one of the grand challenges the world is facing today is water scarcity. According to the latest United Nations report, more than 2 billion people are living in water-stressed areas. Or we can say it's around 3 people out of 10 are facing water stress. This is mainly because of the rapid population growth and industrialization, resulting to unsustainable use of fresh water as well as deterioration of freshwater supplies due to the man-made pollution. It is expected that there will be a shortfall of 40% in freshwater supply by the year 2030. And so this is a very critical issue that needs to be urgently addressed. So the main question here is, how do we address water scarcity? There are two main ways that we can do about this. The first one is basically using the available water that we have in a more efficient way or towards a better use. However, many of the water sources that we have now are polluted and the rest are just not enough for the growing population and urbanization. We need to find alternative sources of water that can be sustainable. Among these unconventional sources of water are wastewater and seawater, wherein they can be treated efficiently to a quality fit for purpose. Today, I am going to focus my talk on desalination technology. As we all know, we have vast amounts of seawater around the world, but they cannot be directly utilized due to their high salt content, which is around 3.58% of salt content in seawater. Thereby, desalination is a perfect method to remove salts from seawater in order to make it potable or at least safe for various applications. Thus, the freshwater scarcity has really sparked innovations in desalination technologies. In the current methods, we have two main methods in desalination, as you can see from here. The first one is thermal-based desalination, and the main one is based on multi-stage flash process, or MSF. And the other one is a membrane-based desalination process, mainly by reverse osmosis. So MSF is a phase change process. So where one applies thermal energy to boil and evaporate water, and then it is condensed back into pure water, as you can see from this figure over here. It's like boiling water and then condensing water back. However, if you can see the process, it is a phase change process. So it requires large amount of energy for evaporation, thus making it very expensive. And besides, if you look at the sample here, it needs a really wide land of area for operation. On the other hand, the state-of-the-art desalination technology nowadays is reverse osmosis, which is based on the use of membranes. So in this process, this is used now. More than 60% of the total desalination technologies around the world is using reverse osmosis. But if you look at the process, a high pressure is needed in the order of around 50 to 80 bars of pressure to overcome the osmotic pressure of seawater. So if you look at this photo here in this figure, you can see that seawater is on the other side and separated by a membrane. So this part is the membrane, a semi-permeable membrane, and the other side is the fresh water, or the purified water. So this part has a lot of salts, and you need a high pressure so that you can allow only water to pass through the membrane. So the membrane will only allow water to pass through, while the remaining salts are left on the other side. So the other side is fresh water or purified water, which can be used for drinking purposes or other applications. So this high pressure needs of reverse osmosis means that they need high pressure pumping. And this high pressure pumping requires electricity to use to power the pump. And so if you are using a lot of electricity, this equates to using a lot of energy, and so there is money involved. So this is a very costly process. And both of these processes are very energy intensive. And so you can see from here, they are energy intensive, which means very expensive, and usually they are in a centralized process. So hence, there is a need to find alternative desalination methods that have lower energy cost, overall energy cost, and still have high efficiency. And this could be done by using the use of renewable energy as well as waste heat reuse. So if you have other sources of energy, then possibly you can reduce your energy cost. And also there's an opportunity for a system that can be decentralized. It means it can be provided or used in inland or small inland or off-grid communities if you are using some renewable energy. So herein, I will introduce two new emerging technologies that are quite promising as an alternative or in conjunction with the reverse osmosis technology, which is the state-of-the-art desalination processes. So the first emerging technology is called membrane distillation, or MD. So in this process, it combines thermal and membrane separation into one. So as you can see from this figure and in this animation over here, in MD, the one requirement is to use a microporous hydrophobic membrane. So it means there's a membrane that separates two sides of the water. On one side is a hot stream. Usually it's around 40 degrees to 60 degrees or even 80 degrees Celsius. And on the other side is a cold stream, or the permeate side. So this is the feed side over here, and this is the permeate side, which is the clean water. The membranes separate the two sides. So the membrane here is hydrophobic. It means that it is water hating. It does not allow liquid water to pass through. So what happens here is that, for example, you have 60 degrees Celsius on one side for a seawater feed, and on the other side is 20 degrees Celsius. So you can see a temperature difference. Because of a temperature difference here, there is a partial vapor pressure difference because of the difference in temperature. So it means water can evaporate from the hot side to the cool side. So in this case, only water vapor is allowed to pass through the membrane, but not the liquid water. So liquid water has to be prevented to pass through the membrane. So there's evaporation and it is condensed back into pure water on the other side, making it very, very clean. If you look at the animation here, we have a hydrophobic membrane, and then you have a hot water side and a cool water side. And in this case, the pink dots here are only vapors. So the only vapors are actually allowed to pass through, and it is condensed back on the other side as a pure water. So the main advantage of this process is that it is a very high rejection rate. It means that in theory, almost all salts or impurities that are non-volatile can be rejected by the membrane by this process. So 100% rejection rate for this process. So it can only evaporate the volatile components. And as you can see, if you compare this one to MSF, for example, you have a lower or moderate temperature range. So you can go as low as 40 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees Celsius. It's possible to do that. So it's a lower temperature needed for this process. At the same time, it operates at low pressure. The reverse osmosis operates at a very, very high pressure. That's why in terms of safety, this system is more safe. Okay, there are less safety issues. You can use some plastic materials because these are low pressure process. And of course, there's also the use of solar or low grade heat source like waste heat is possible because of the moderate temperature needed. So you can use solar light to heat up the water for this one, making it more energy saving process. All right, so the main difference of this one versus the other membrane separation process is that it works on the driving force or partial vapor pressure difference. This is induced by the temperature difference rather than a pressure-driven process. Membrane distillation is currently not yet commercially available because of some key issues and challenges. And one of the main challenges is membrane wetting. So as you remember before, one of the requirements of MD is to have a hydrophobic membrane. But the occurrence or the components of the feed water could affect the characteristics of this membrane. Like for example, if there are surfactants or low surface tension fluids or even organics and other foulants that could change the properties of the membrane or the characteristics of the membrane, and thereby allowing the liquid water to pass through the membrane and intrude the whole of the membrane and goes towards the permeate side, and thus contaminating the resulting fresh water. So in this case, if the liquid part penetrates the membrane, which is wetting part, then it will lead to a process failure. So we want to make sure that the membrane can actually prevent the liquid water from passing through the membrane. And so we need to modify or make the membrane more functionalized so that it can really prevent different kinds of feed water. And the other issue is the low flux. Currently, there are no specifically designed membranes for MD, and most of the membranes used for MD, especially for experiments, are based on the commercial microfiltration membranes, which are not really designed for MD. Thus, the flux is quite low. So flux refers to the amount of produced water, the volume of produced water per square meter area of that membrane per unit time or per hour. So the higher the flux, the better water production rate, as well as maintaining a high salt rejection. So there should be a balance between a flux and salt rejection as well. So based on these key issues, our research objective for our research at UTS is to develop novel distillation membranes with special wettability for high-performing and robust membrane distillation. And so we try to change the membrane properties to have a super hydrophobic membrane, or maybe super omniphobic membrane, so it can tackle and address various kinds of feed water. So our approaches for these membrane fabrication techniques are three. The first one is the conventional flat sheet casting, or based on phase inversion membranes. So we can see a flat sheet membrane here. This is the top side. This is the back side, wherein you can control the various pore properties, the pore sizes, the porosity, and the thickness of the membrane, so that you can also control the performance of that membrane. The second approach, which I'm going to talk about more, is electrospinning of nanofibers. So if you are not familiar with electrospinning, so basically you have a polymer solution here, and you add some pressure so that the solution will come out from a nozzle, and this nozzle is connected to a very high voltage power supply. So we are talking about 30 kilovolts, 40 kilovolts of power, and then of course this is grounded on the collector here. So once the polymer solution, because of the application of a high voltage power supply, overcomes the surface tension of the polymer solution, it will emit a jet, which is expanded towards the collector here. And if you can see from here, you can see a lot of nanofibers being emitted, coming out from a nozzle and collected on the other side of the collector here. And so the collector collects the membrane. So in this case, it is somewhat considered as a layer by layer deposition of membrane. So it can be considered as a form of a 3D printing technology. But you can control various parameters like material parameters or process parameters, so that they can control the various porosities, pore sizes, thickness, as well as the surface functionalization of the various membranes. I will talk more in the later slides for this. The last approach is based on hollow fiber spinning. So in industry, most of the membranes are based on hollow fiber because they are very highly dense. You can pack them densely in a module, and so it looks like this. So there's you have a hollow part wherein the feed water or the permeate water can pass through, and the other part is where you have the other side of the membrane as well, and you can control the various pore sizes based on your needs of your process. So these are the three main approaches we are conducting in the lab, but I will focus on my discussion for today based on electrospinning. So these are some of the designs that we have fabricated and prepared for our membrane distillation application. So the first one I'm showing you here is a carbon nanotube incorporated nanofiber membrane. So in this case, we incorporated various concentration of carbon nanotubes, which are very good materials with good hydrophobicity, and we tried to incorporate them so that it can add some functionalities towards the new nanofiber membrane. And we found out after adding the carbon nanotubes, the color changed from white color of a nanofiber membrane into a dark color because of the presence of these carbon nanotubes, and it has improved the hydrophobicity of such membrane towards a super hydrophobic membrane. And then we tested various feed water, this carbon nanotube membrane. We tested in the ionized water in 35 grams per liter sodium chloride solution feed water, which means as like a seawater concentration, and then a 70 grams per liter of sodium chloride concentration. The green one is the one with a carbon nanotube at 5.8%. The blue one is where there is no carbon nanotube, it's just a pristine PVDF-based nanofiber membrane, and the pink one is a commercial PVDF microfiltration membrane. As you can see, our fabricated membrane, the green one, has resulted to very, very high flux and has consistently been the highest flux among three various samples. So after this, we also tested a different approach. We made a dual layer nanofiber membrane based on PVDF at the upper part as a nanofiber, and the other side of the membrane is a pan nanofiber membrane, which is hydrophilic. So in this case, there's hydrophobic layer and this hydrophilic layer, and because of the thickness change of this membrane, the mass flux of membrane distillation is increasing, so we can also control the mass transfer from the feed side towards the permeate side. And we tested it one with two kinds of feed water at 35 grams per liter of sodium chloride solution, and as well as distilled water. And then we tested in different types of membrane. This is a pristine nanofiber membrane made of PVDF HHP. The second one is the dual layer membrane, and the other one is another dual layer membrane with different thickness. And we found out that our dual layer membrane has really increased the flux considerably based on the commercial membrane as well as on our pristine nanofiber membrane. The same way, we also tested with graphene, and we tried to functionalize the graphene and see a similar way of doing it in carbon nanotube membrane, and we found a very high flux of almost 25 LMH, or liters per square meter per hour. One other approach that we tested was by plasma modification. So we exposed our nanofiber membrane, a PVDF nanofiber membrane, into plasma treatment, and we found out that the plasma treatment, depending on the time, the duration of the plasma treatment, when we expose that one on the membrane, we changed the characteristics of the membrane into an omniphobic membrane. It has created this omniphobic surface, and if you could look at the various contact angle of different feed water, like we have ethanol, Triton X, benzene, all of these are different kinds of water, but you can see they are very good formation of a spherical shape depending on the type of feed water that you have. And it means that our membrane, this white one is our membrane, has really shown very good prevention of penetration of such different feed liquid. So it resulted to very good stable flux. This is a normalized flux, so this green one is based on our membrane, and even if we have increased the surfactant concentration, the SDS, this is surfactant, our membrane performance has remained very robust throughout 10 hours of operation. So this one has shown that the salt rejection is still very, very high, and we have fabricated a very robust membrane for various types of feed water. One of our current works on membrane distillation, especially on the fabrication of membrane, is on the preparation of a Janus membrane. As I mentioned, a Janus membrane, or a Janus type of membrane, has two opposing wettabilities in both sides of the membrane. The other side is hydrophobic and the other side is hydrophilic. So in this case, this is a hydrophilic layer and the other side is hydrophobic layer. The main good thing, advantage of this type of membrane with two opposing wettabilities, it can be used for various processes, like for anti-wetting or anti-fouling purposes for MD, because if we are exposed to organics and to have some hydrophobic foulants, then the hydrophilic layer will definitely reject these hydrophobic foulants because of this hydrophilic layer. If it's only exposed to hydrophobic, so hydrophobic and hydrophobic will have a better adhesion. So in this case, we can the Janus membrane can actually help in preventing wetting as well as fouling formation on the membrane. This type of work is being done by my PhD student currently. He's working on this one, and we tried to use a different approach in this case. We use a commercial membrane, and then we tried to modify this membrane, the upper part of the membrane, of the surface part of the membrane, using an inkjet printing modification. So we prepared some solutions based on PAI and polydopamine solution, and changed the cartridge of this inkjet printer, and then printed the membrane to modify. So we tested at various layers, different layers of the membrane, and made into Janus type of membrane. So the resulting membrane is like this. This is a commercial membrane, and then this part here, the very thin layer, is made of modified by inkjet printing. So the results of these are very interesting for membrane distillation, and we achieve very good flux performance as well as salt rejection. And this will be presented later on in this conference by my student. So he will present the results of this work this afternoon for his oral presentation. So the second emerging technology that I want to discuss is about interfacial solar water evaporation. In this system, the solar water evaporation is a passive technique. It means that there are no moving parts in this technique. This is used for desalination, which utilizes a photothermal material. So this is important. This is the main material of this process. So the photothermal materials are usually made of carbon or semiconductors or plasmonic materials or even carbonized biomass are materials that can absorb solar light and then convert that light into heat. And this heat is now used to generate evaporation at this absorber water interface. So as I mentioned, as the photothermal material is a requirement here. So this is how it works for solar water evaporation, and this is the evolution of the different designs before. So the first design in many years ago was to put the solar absorber at the bottom of the water. So this looks like a solar steel. So in this case, as you can see, there's a bulk water here and the solar absorber is at the bottom. So sunlight is eliminated here, and because of the bulk water volume of this one, the light that comes in is diffused, and so whatever that comes in inside the solar absorber, the heating is not so efficient because there's already a lot of diffusion of the light here. So only less light has been converted to heat. So this is less efficient design. The second design was to use some photothermal nanoparticles that are dispersed inside the volume of the water. In this design as well, there's a lot of dispersion as well as diffusion and thermal losses because the nanoparticles are too tiny and they release a lot of heat. So there's a lot of heat losses in this design. So these two designs were the previous designs that have very low efficiency. Normally it's around 40 to 50% of solar thermal efficiency. The latest one and the most effective one is what we call as the interfacial solar water evaporation. Instead of putting the solar absorber at the bottom of the water, why not put the solar absorber on top of the water as a floating solar absorber? So now the solar absorber is floating on the top of the water, and so the sunlight heats up or lights the solar absorber and light is absorbed and converted into heat. And as you can see, there's an interface, a very thin interface of water and absorber here. So there is a very high efficiency in terms of evaporation because it's only heating a thin layer of water at the interface of the system. So normally the design is a 2D structure that is just floated on top of the water. So if you look at the system, how it looks like as a full system. So you have a solar absorber here, which is floating on top of untreated water, like a seawater. And then you have a glass plate here that is transparent and also serves as a condenser. So once the light is illuminating on the absorber and the absorber absorbs the light and converts into heat, it will evaporate water here. So the evaporated water is then condensed back as liquid water on the condenser here. And the condenser now drops down, and then the produced water will be collected as a condensed water. So this one now is pure or purified water, and that can be used for drinking. So this system is very simple, but there are many design requirements for this one. A very good photothermal material with high light to heat conversion efficiency is one requirement. And of course, the many heat losses on the design of this system in the floating on the water is also a big consideration. So some of the main challenges of this system is the need for better photothermal efficiency, basically new materials that has good thermal efficiency, and also to make sure that it is a salt-free process, because you are using seawater, sometimes salt can be produced on top of the system here. So here I am showing you an example of what we have synthesized recently, a 3D microflower solar absorber made of copper-based, a semiconductor-based solar absorber. So we made this design here with microflower structure, and we have a petal-like structure here, which can trap the light and can enhance the overall light to heat conversion efficiency, as we found out. So we tested, we deposited these microflowers onto a substrate of a microfiltration membrane. And then once we have deposited one, it looks like this, a black color on top of a microfiltration membrane. And then we floated that structure or that solar absorber into the water. And then we illuminated a solar simulator at one sun or various intensity of solar light. And then we illuminated that one over here. And then we checked the change of the weight of the water using a weighing scale. So in this case, we check also the surface temperature as well as the bulk temperature of water. So the surface temperature of the solar absorber using an infrared camera. So you can see here infrared camera of only water. And then if we use the solar absorber using these 3D microflowers at one sun, we could see a very bright light here as a bright color, which indicates a high temperature. So it has already increased the temperature. So as we increase the intensity of the solar light, we have also increased the surface temperature of the solar absorber. And so if from here for around 30 minutes of operation, for water only, there's not much increase in terms of its temperature. But when we included the solar absorber on top of the water, at one sun, we have increased almost 40 degrees Celsius of that surface temperature of the solar absorber. And up to 2 sun is around more than 50 degrees Celsius of surface temperature. And this increase of surface temperature has also indicated that it has resulted to a high solar water evaporation rate. So the highest one we have at various concentrations of the 3D microflowers is 1.42 kilogram per square meter per hour, which is very near the theoretical limit of the solar water evaporation efficiency. So this goes to show that our structure or our new material based on 3D microflowers has a good capacity for solar water evaporation. We are also currently testing various designs of solar absorbers, like based on gold nanoparticles as well as on hydrogel. But there are many other photothermal absorber designs in literature, and the trend nowadays is usually the photothermal absorbers are based on a true 2D structure. It means they are flat surface. They are flat in design. But this flat design, if you look at here, this is a solar absorber and we have the water. So we are floating the solar absorber on top of the water. So the water is evaporated and there is a transparent glass here that makes or that serves as a condenser, which will condense back the evaporated water and it's collected back here as a pure water. So the system has a flat surface or flat design of a solar absorber. However, this design, as you can see from here, the 2D structure design has a lot of challenges in terms of thermal losses, because you have convection loss, or there's a conduction loss going to the water. There's a convection loss because of the wind, possibly wind coming over here, And of course, there's also radiation loss. So there's a lot of losses in this system for a 2D structure. Many of the newer designs recently has been on 3D structures. So this is where 3D printing can come in. So as you can see here, there are many 3D structures like an umbrella-like 3D structure or a tree-inspired 3D structure. There's also like a cubic or a cylindrical 3D structure. And the good thing about this 3D structure is that you are increasing the surface area, the overall area of your solar absorber. At the same time, you are providing some structures that can trap light or that can bounce off light within the structure so that you can reuse the heat that is transformed from the light to heat conversion. Then you can reuse the heat and increase the overall efficiency of your design. And this is where 3D printing is most likely be very useful, because in many complex geometries can be designed in 3D printed photothermal absorbers. And so we can definitely design something, a new geometry that could enhance the overall efficiency of your solar absorber. So this is where the direction of the solar water absorber designs right now, as in increasing the efficiency as well as on increasing the solar water evaporation production rate. There are many opportunities for 3D printing in the desalination water treatment applications. As you can see from here, for example, in terms of the preparation of membranes and modules. So you can see from here the various resolutions needed for the different parts. So when we are talking about membranes, which is basically used for many desalination and water treatment applications, we have flat sheet membranes, and so we can fabricate membranes at this resolution here. And normally the pore sizes of the membranes range from the 0.1 nanometers to a few microns, and thickness also is quite thin, from 100 nanometers to a few hundreds of microns. So in terms of the resolution limit for 3D printers, this is a bit challenging because of the need for a very high resolution. But there are a few 3D printers now available that can do that, but still they're quite expensive and may not be very practical for use. However, if you look at the other parts of the membrane system, then you have some feed spacers, which are the spacers are in the thickness of about microns to a couple of millimeters for the thickness of the feed spacer, and also even the module, because when you have a feed spacer is the one that you use in between membranes when you make it into a module. So you have a flat sheet, so you have a feed spacer in between each membrane so that it acts as a feed channel for flow of water, as well as for stability of the whole membrane system. So you need some feed spacers there. And in fact, there are many studies now using 3D printing to fabricate different shapes and designs of feed spacers that could utilize turbulence so that it can act as a self-cleaning process, or even have the capacity to increase the hydrodynamic conditions of the flow, and it can affect also the flux performance. On the other side, you can also make a module from centimeters to meter scale as a 3D printed module for this resolution limit. So this is part is very attractive for in the use of 3D printing to fabricate these parts. So this is a great opportunity for that. There are many other applications for 3D printing in desalination and water treatment. Aside from spacers, membranes definitely, if the resolution permits. The solar absorbers, as I mentioned previously, can be made by 3D printing for 3D structure. We have also carrier media or capsule for wastewater treatment. So there are various designs and various geometry which wherein 3D printing has no problem with fabrication. Modules like this, ceramic filters, even photocatalysts, and even adsorbents. So these various parts can be a very good opportunity for 3D printing to be applied. And some of the examples in literature that has been used for 3D printing is, for example, in this case, is a support layer for membranes. So we can fabricate support layers because they are kind of big in terms of resolution. So it's okay to be printed as 3D printed support layer. And on top of this support layer, you can fabricate separately the membrane itself. So this one will only act as a stability for, or a support layer for a membrane, so that it will be stable when it is used in high pressure or pressure driven process. So this is one example of a way we support design that is that was printed by 3D printing. As I mentioned previously, the resolution needed for membranes are quite high, and so there are only very few 3D printers that are that can do that. But another way to do or to fabricate membranes is through the use of a layer by layer technique. In this case, is about electrospinning or electrospraying. So we can put some solutions and they are formed on top of a rotating drum, and the membrane is produced by layer. So we can count the number of layers that is printed on top of this membrane. So this is an example of the produced membrane based on electrospraying technique in this case. And this membrane has been really very good performance in terms of filtration, because the layers that are formed here can be uniformly controlled because of the process itself. So this has been published in a very high journal, in Science Journal. And so there's a potential for this type of technique, although this is not the conventional way of 3D printing, but still considered as an additive manufacturing technology because it is a layer by layer process. So these are some of the opportunities, and I hope you will look at it and try to see what other things that you can contribute in terms of the use of 3D printing for desalination and water treatment applications. So this summarizes my talk. So I have discussed two of the emerging technologies, such as membrane distillation and solar water evaporation, that can be very promising as decentralized and low-cost desalination technologies. However, they are not yet fully commercialized because of some challenges, especially for MD. There is not yet specifically designed membranes for MD. That's why we still need to develop new membranes that has anti-wetting properties. For SWE, there's a need to investigate the use of 3D absorber designs that can enhance the overall solar water evaporation performance. There's also a big potential for 3D printing in these two areas, not only for these two areas, but for the whole desalination and water treatment application. So 3D printing is highly potential for the preparation of spacers, membranes, even membranes, as well as modules for MD and other desalination technologies. There's a need for further energy efficiency improvement and material development, both for membrane distillation and solar water evaporation, before it can be commercially viable.